I gave a toast disclosing that my brother had slept with my ex years prior after my parents brought him to my wedding in secret. His expectant wife has now filed for divorce. I apologize in advance for making this a lengthy read. Last week, I, 32M, married Meg, 25F, the love of my life. The wedding ceremony was lovely, but, to be honest, there was some unnecessary drama. In addition, my brother may be going through a divorce as a result of what transpired. Additionally, the family is always pressuring me to make amends, but I honestly don't believe I am at fault, which is why I've come to you for advice. My 34-year-old brother Colin and I don't get along well. As children, at least, we were pretty close as two brothers can be. It wasn't flawless. Even as children, we had our share of arguments, but our connection as siblings was never odd. We got along well because I knew he had my back and I had his. Our parents always prioritized family and made an effort to teach us the same principles. I regret that I was the only one who exhibited these principles. I began dating she, who is currently 32 years old, 6 years ago when I was 26. Everyone around me knew that I was deeply in love with her. She belonged to the same circle of friends that I was then hanging out with, and I fell in love with her the moment I laid eyes on her. She seemed like the whole deal to me. She was tall, beautiful, articulate, and all around intelligent and attractive. I totally forgot about her poison since I was so enamored with her. She was really poisonous, boy. When I first started dating her, drama took over my life and took over totally. Despite being a wonderful girl, she wasn't the ideal fit for me. We were completely incompatible. She was really aggressive, whereas I was extremely non-confrontational. Actually, she thrived on drama. Every other week there was a fresh altercation about something that seemed so arbitrary and unimportant to me. However, I was obsessed with her. I continued to ignore all the warning signs because of this. After 6 months of dating, I discovered she was having an affair with a coworker. I was heartbroken when I accidentally found out. She continued to deny it until I challenged her, at which point she broke down and spoke clean. Despite my sadness, she apologized profusely. She admitted her error and promised to try her hardest to win back my confidence. I foolishly trusted her. I knew I shouldn't have, but I gave her another opportunity. Cheaters. I've always thought, never change. And I've never been shown to be mistaken. I've met cheats in a variety of roles throughout my life, and none of them were able to alter their behavior. Despite knowing all of that, I thought, or rather hoped, that this time would be different and she wouldn't be like the others, so I gave her a chance. I was mistaken. It was all okay for the first couple weeks. I believed that perhaps we could get over the tragedy and start a new life together, so I began to trust her once more. I began to have a persistent suspicion that something was amiss 3 or 4 months after I discovered she was cheating. She was behaving suspiciously and shadily. Since I had no evidence and didn't want to think she was cheating once more, I mentally justified her actions. However, it continued to fester until I eventually asked her if she had anything to tell me or if something was happening. She got extremely defensive and said that I was suspicious of her without cause, and that I should have told her if I had decided never to trust her again so she wouldn't waste time trying to get it back. She essentially deceived me into thinking I was being overly suspicious and that everything was fine. I know I believed her. Even if I'm a fool, I couldn't get rid of the uneasy feeling. She continued to act strangely for a few weeks. Even though I had no evidence, I began secretly monitoring her phone because I was getting tired of overanalyzing everything. I should have realized the relationship was over at that moment. Even if I hadn't discovered anything on her phone, my complete lack of trust in her should have been sufficient enough for me to leave, even if I hadn't discovered anything. However, I'm happy I pried because I discovered something that fundamentally altered my life, and it hasn't been the same since. It took me a long time to realize what was going on, but when I did, I felt like I had been hit in the face. In essence, she had been unfaithful to me for some time. Not with anybody, though. She was seeing Colin instead of me. The hurt I experienced upon seeing those texts has never been experienced by me. The worst kind of dirty work was being done to me by the 2 individuals who were meant to be the closest to me. I read something that I couldn't believe. All it did was make me want to cry uncontrollably and drop on my knees. At that moment, Shay came in and noticed me holding the phone. I just showed her the conversation I had opened, smashed the phone against the wall, and left when she began screaming at me and told me I had no right to invade her private. I believe I spent 3 or 4 hours walking. She gave me a few calls, but I didn't answer. She forced Colin to phone me after realizing I wouldn't be speaking to her. I wasn't having any of it when he phoned me once and then texted me a few times with stuff like, "I want to explain and it's not what you think. I wasn't going to reject my own eyes, and what I had witnessed was sufficient evidence." The next day I texted Shay to come get her belongings from my house. When she contacted me again, I didn't pick up. I felt somewhat numb for the following 3 days. I had no one to talk to. I appreciated that she packed up her belongings and walked away without a hitch. After that, Colin didn't make an effort to contact anyone, and how could he? After what he'd done, what could he possibly say to me? However, I believe I phoned my folks a week or so later and explained the entire situation to them. Although they were upset by the circumstance, they initially stood by me when I informed them that Colin was dead to me, and that I wouldn't be returning home. They supported me for the first few months and held Colin accountable as well. As far as I can tell, Colin became extremely defensive and told them that he and Shay were in love, but they didn't believe him, and I'm really thankful for that. I just stopped talking to Colin and went to therapy. I started to sincerely feel that God had truly saved me through this entire ordeal, despite the fact that it hurt like hell, after realizing in therapy how poisonous Shay was for me. I gradually got over that experience. However, I never spoke to Colin again and never forgiven him. I met Meg a few months later, and the rest is history. Unlike my relationship with Shay, which was full of drama, our relationship was calm and easygoing when we first started dating. It wasn't until a few years after we made the decision to be married that I told anybody in the family about Meg. She was well aware of my predicament with Colin, our estrangement, and my concerns about presenting her to my family. My folks were thrilled when I informed them we were engaged and presented them to her. I suppose they were also relieved. They expressed their happiness for me and complimented me on meeting someone. They also told me directly that they were even more delighted that we could once more be a true family. When I asked them what they meant by it, my mother explained that Colin and Shay were no longer dating and that I had moved on from Shay. Now that everything was behind us, Colin and I could carry on as brothers. Although I was astonished and offended that she could even make such a suggestion, I made an effort to show her respect and consider her point of view. I informed her that, although I was aware that she believed the situation was instantly and miraculously settled since I had moved on and Colin and Shay were no longer together, the truth was that my brother had slept with my girlfriend behind my back. I assured my mother that I would never forgive him or get over this without a fight. It was more about Colin's ability to deceive me in that way than it was about Shay. When I told my mother this, she became upset and told me that I needed to understand that Colin and I are brothers and must always be together as family. I informed her that this small family lesson that we support and stick by one another, no matter what, should have been taught to Colin as well. I informed her that I was the victim and he was the one who had harmed me, thus I had the freedom to choose whether or not to forgive him. When things between Mom and myself started to grow hot, Dad stepped in to help me. He advised my mother to stop pressuring me to do something I didn't feel comfortable doing. Mom consented, although it was obvious that she didn't like it. During the uncomfortable dinner, Mom attempted to ask Meg to help me understand. Meg just stated that she thought I was capable of making my own judgments and that, if the time came, I would forgive Colin. By now, Mom was virtually enraged. She had this idealistic vision of our family as it was and will always be, and I'm not sure why or how she believed that I would simply forget this and move on. Furthermore, she refused to acknowledge that the charade was shattered and that the family would never return to its previous state. Mom agreed when Dad promised her that the subject would not be discussed again. For a while, our relationship was tight, but it gradually improved. She made an effort to be extremely aware of limits and avoided bringing up Colin again. I thus had no grounds for complaint. I had no idea that my folks were preparing a small intervention and were ready to spoil my wedding. Both Mom and Meg's mother participated in the wedding preparations. She was well aware of the number of attendees, the dress code, the preparations, and other details well in advance. My father didn't participate much in the procedure. Throughout the whole preparation phase, Mom did nothing unusual. There was not a single mention of Colin. She even expressed her regret to me, stating that she shouldn't have pushed me so hard that day, and that she had started to think that there could be a chance for reconciliation but later recognized that Colin had harmed me in the most terrible way. Therefore, I had no reason to distrust her or question her motives, but I was mistaken. My best man, Richard Rick, 32M, a school acquaintance, rushed to me on the day of the wedding and said I had an urgent situation that needed to be resolved. What was going on? I questioned him. And he mentioned that Colin and his wife had arrived at the location with their parents. I was furious. When I ordered Rick to get them to go, he said he did everything he could to avoid making a disturbance, but they wouldn't go. He informed them that I would be upset to see Colin and that he wasn't invited. However, according to my mother, they are related, and I would always pick Colin over Rick since he is my biological brother. Yes, exactly, Mother. I demanded an explanation from them right away since I couldn't believe they had plotted all of this behind my back. What the devil was going on? I questioned my dad over the phone. He explained that they felt it was important to include Colin and his wife since they didn't want the family to think there was a divide between the two brothers. He requested that I only put on a show for a few hours, after which everyone would go and act as if nothing had occurred. He acknowledged that I probably didn't expect this, but he claimed that everyone would benefit from it, so I wouldn't mind complying for the family's sake. When he realized that I didn't want anything to do with Colin, I informed him that he had violated my confidence in the same way that his adored son had. For one day he advised me to swallow my emotions and quit being so theatrical. I informed him that he had no right to destroy my wedding day since it was my wedding day. He advised me to tone down my tendency toward theatrics a bit, but that no one was wrecking anything. I ought to have questioned him about why it was so crucial to maintain this family facade for my wedding, but nobody cared to do the same for Colin's. I was so angry that I didn't even realize he was married, and all of these thoughts simply came to me afterward. I was just blindly angry at the moment. All I wanted to do was go over there, pick them up by the collar, and go. I didn't give a damn whether it made a scene or damaged the family's reputation. All I wanted was for them to leave. When Rick presented me with a considerably less violent and much more vengeful suggestion, I was unable to think clearly. He informed me that there was only one method to get revenge on everyone, and that it was possible if I was cool with it. I thought it was a brilliant idea, but I didn't want to spoil Meg's day, and it was too dramatic for a wedding. I promised to give it some thought and report back to Rick. Meg asked me what was going on after seeing Colin and his wife, but the wedding went off without a hitch. I briefly explained what had transpired to her. After the wedding, I pulled her aside to ask whether she was comfortable with my carrying out Rick and my plan. Although she was a bit apprehensive, she assured me that she fully supported me, and that there was no better time or location than now if that was what I wanted to do to set up my family. I encouraged her to simply relax and take in the drama after thanking her and saying, "God, I love my wife," when family members and close friends were sat together. To make a toast, some stood up. Rick began it all because we intended for me to toast Colin and explain to everyone how he slept with my ex-girlfriend, which resulted in our separation, and how it was thanks to him that I met my wife. I would be going into great length in my toast, which would be cruel to Colin and my parents. But they earned it. My parents did because they showed no concern for my feelings and the pain I endured, and Colin did because he was a piece of trash. All that mattered to them was Colin's and the family's reputation in society, and I intended to rip them both to pieces in front of everyone on the planet. After everyone had finished talking about Meg and me, I stood up and announced that I also needed to give a toast. I can't recall precisely what I said, but I'll tell you the main idea. I began by expressing that I wanted to salute Colin, my beloved brother. He and my parents went completely white the moment I stated it. However, his wife was merely perplexed, and I suspected she was unaware of the reason behind Colin and my separation. She was also extremely pregnant, which was the cherry on top. I was also angry at that part. Why would he parade his pregnant wife around at my wedding? I got the impression that his only goal was to steal the thunder. In any case, I went on with my toast. Even though Colin stabbed me in the back in a manner worse than an enemy, I still wanted to thank him since it was his treachery that finally brought me to Meg. I explained that Colin and I had been brothers for a very long time. I continued by explaining how, at the age of 26, I fell in love with a lady who wasn't the proper fit for me, but I was too young and impressionable to see all of her shortcomings. Didn't decide to break up with her until she did the worst thing. Then I revealed the truth to everyone in the room. The last straw that caused me to stop things with my ex-girlfriend, go on a healing process, and meet my wife Meg, was when I revealed that she had cheated on me with my brother. I also didn't spare my folks. I claimed I was happy my parents had decided to bring Colin and his wife in surreptitiously, even though I had harbored a long-standing resentment against him, to the extent that we hadn't spoken for 5 years. So that I could at last thank Colin for his actions, and for bringing about the appropriate circumstances in my life. I wanted my parents to be embarrassed, even though I knew they were. They had crossed all of my boundaries, and I wasn't going to give them away so lightly. It sounded as though my mother might burst into tears at the sound of the crowd's gasps. The situation could not be diffused. Everything I had spoken was for everyone to hear. Colin was unable to look up and look people in the eye, because his wife, whose name I don't even know, was staring at him in shock. Rick, Meg, and I did nothing to ease the situation, and it was completely uncomfortable for him. Sitting there, my parents gazed at the floor. Even though Mom was trying her hardest not to cry and Dad was twitching his fingers, the room was so silent that even her smallest sniffles could be heard. In that strange calm, I thought I could hear my heartbeat. After my toast, I simply sat down and began to eat. Colin and my family were the center of attention, but no one spoke. His wife was the last to rise, expressed regret on his behalf and thanked us for inviting them to join in the festivities. Then she bounded away. I couldn't help but feel awful for making her go through this humiliation for no fault of her own. It's unfortunate that she was caught in the crossfire, and I had to confront both my parents and Colin. Only once my parents and my beloved brother departed did the real fun start. However, I have received a ton of SMS from my parents, particularly my mother, claiming that I have destroyed their dignity in front of everyone, and that I have no right to wear the family's filthy clothes in public. I wanted to enjoy at least portion of my wedding, so I didn't reply. Since then, Mom has been messaging Meg, and I can tell that it's starting to bother her. Meg keeps sending her messages from various Instagram profiles or contacting her from new phones even after I ordered her to block her mother. Meg is suffering greatly as a result of all this negativity, and I regret exposing her to it. She is not deserving, she is the one that rescued me, and I've brought her down with me, which is simply wrong. I've urged my mother to stop bringing Meg into the drama, but she claims that I was the one who brought her into it by starting that incident at the wedding, and that Meg and I will now have to deal with the consequences of my actions. Since my mother is obstinate and nothing I say would convince her otherwise, I know it's pointless to argue with her. Furthermore, since what I did was malicious, I can't expect her to. My wife is suffering as a result of my little vengeance trip, and I don't want that for her at all. I feel like I've created more difficulty than I've been worth, and I'm not sure how to get my mother off our backs. Update 1: Amy, my SIL, called me. I picked up since I didn't have her number stored. She was really kind and expressed her sincere regret for phoning without warning. However, she claimed that Colin's version of events differed greatly from her own, so she wanted to see me and hear my version. She pleaded with me to keep her visit a secret from her family, but I informed her that I don't speak to them anyhow, so she was okay on that front. To be honest, I had conflicting feelings about this. However, Meg said that since she was expecting a kid and deserved to know Colin's true nature, we had to assist her. I know Meg is right, even if this will lead to further problems. Amy needs to understand that she is not at blame. Since she has never harmed me, I cannot contribute to her life being ruined. Despite my extreme nervousness, I consented to meet her. This has gone far further than I had expected, and I don't believe Colin will have a good ending. I don't feel sorry for Colin since he deserves all the awful things that happened to him. I simply don't want to become involved in family turmoil once more. And I definitely don't want to include Meg. Even though I know it won't go well, I still hope it does. I know this drama won't end with me meeting Amy today because of her response to the entire outburst during the wedding. Update 2: I believe the meeting went well. I was quite sorry for her. She arrived by herself, and since she is pregnant, it looks like the baby will arrive at any moment. She appeared to have been weeping. Fortunately, Meg was also present and helped to defuse the situation. Amy replied she wanted to hear the entire tale again when I asked if she had any questions. I explained everything to her, including how I confronted him and how I learned about it. I also informed her that, because to family obligations, my mother was pressuring me to restore normalcy between Colin and me. When I asked her what tale Colin had given her, she said that Shay fell in love with Colin despite the fact that Colin had claimed that we were friends. I ended our friendship because I couldn't acknowledge that I had always had affections for her. Additionally, Colin and she only briefly dated a year after I stopped communicating with her. That was a whole falsehood, I told her. I never bothered to inquire or find out how long they dated, so I have no idea. She denied that my parents had given her the same tale as Colin when I questioned. She claimed that Colin had informed her that it was a very delicate subject for the family, and that my parents didn't want to discuss me since I had shut everyone off. Whenever she saw her parents, she hardly ever mentioned me. I inquired as to whether she had received an invitation to the wedding, and she said that their mother was mostly pressuring them to leave. Since they hadn't gotten an invitation, Amy stated that she didn't want to go. She was also aware of the animosity between Colin and me. However, Mom essentially used blackmail to get them both to go. Colin was also not interested in going. She said that her mother insisted that we put the past behind us and reunite as a family for the sake of the child. She never sought to check with me because she assumed I could have told Mom that I wanted Colin to be there. Furthermore, she never imagined that reality would be so drastically different that it would utterly upend her life. I felt terrible for her, but I was at a loss for what to do. I've instructed her to contact me if I can be of any assistance. My brother is a terrible person who not only betrays his brother but also lies to his wife, and I don't want her to suffer because of this. She appeared rather disturbed about the whole situation, therefore I believe she will go with a divorce. All I can hope is that everything works out for her. Being a single mother is difficult. Unlike Colin and my mother, my dad isn't holding me responsible for anything that happened. He contacted me and told me. He recently told me that Colin was going through a difficult moment and that he might attempt to contact me by phone, but he has requested me to keep my distance. I informed him that I had been avoiding him until they made the decision to invite him to my wedding. He remained silent about that. My mom and Colin are apparently attempting to contact me, but I'm secure from their assault since they've been banned everywhere. I am not aware of the specifics of the divorce. But since Colin genuinely loves Amy, I am aware that he isn't handling it well, I feel a little smug about it all, and I believe that karma has finally come back to haunt him. I feel sorry for Amy, and Meg and I plan to support her when the baby is born, but I have no regrets or feelings of guilt for Colin. He is deserving. He intentionally shattered me once, and now he's broken himself. When you violate someone's trust and let them down, that's just the way it is.